Well, good morning everyone. Welcome back. It's good to be back myself, filming again. If you saw my community post, you'll know that I had surgery yesterday, a week ago. It was a minor surgery, so I'm feeling a lot better now. Just had to do a lot of resting last week. Got really bored and restless because I literally had to lay down the entire time and getting up and doing anything for a small amount of time always made me just feel bad again. So I really got bored and restless. The sun is really bright this morning coming in the window. But anyway, I'm feeling much better, much more like myself, and things are looking great. Everything looked successful. As far as I know, I do have one more post-op appointment next week, but yeah, anyway, thank you for your prayers if you prayed for me. I really appreciated it. And yeah, today I'm finally, let's adjust the lighting here a little bit for the sun coming in. I am finally going to be doing my November recap. Now that we're halfway through December, you know, but anyway, better late than never. It was a really good reading month, I feel. I read 9 books, which kind of blew my mind. Excuse me, not sure what's going on with my voice this morning. Yes, I read 9 books and I DNF'd 1. The majority of them are at least 3.5 to 5 stars, but a few 2 stars, and actually just 1 2-star, I think, or maybe 2. A few 2 stars, maybe less, I don't know. But I'll go through all of those. I'm actually going to adjust the blind. Is that better so it's not directly going in my face? Anyway, I'm going to start with the nonfiction that I read for this month, because the rest of the books that I read were books that I was reading for the Historathon challenge that I was doing. And the nonfiction one obviously was not a part of that. But I usually try to read a nonfiction every month. And that one was Live Your Truth and Other Lies by Alisa Childers. I loved this book. 5 stars. It's absolutely incredible and eye-opening. She basically just goes through some popular quotes that you'll see passed around mostly on social media that seem inspirational, seem good, and people share and like it without really looking at it. And she just basically dives in and kind of like takes them apart and like uses scripture to challenge them, and challenge our thinking, and just simply believing some of these quotes. You know, they all sound good, they make us feel good, but ultimately they are subtle lies that can undermine our faith and undermine scripture. And so I just found it very challenging and eye-opening and very interesting. Like I said before, I love Alisa Childers. I love her podcast. I've learned so much from her the last 2 years, just listening to her podcast and also reading her other book, Another Gospel, which is her personal journey through becoming exposed to progressive Christianity and how that made her question everything she knew about historic Christianity and all of that. But anyway, I highly recommend this book. I think it's a very easy read. That's one thing I love about Alisa Childers. She's an apologist that anybody could listen to and understand it without using massive words, and like it's not so intellectual and using big words that the average person couldn't understand everything. And I really appreciate that about her books. And I also think that she does such a great job of challenging popular beliefs that Christians even believe, that go against scripture. She does it with grace and gentleness and kindness, to the best of her ability, and I always appreciate that about her, and I want to learn from her as well, because yeah, that's a difficult job. If you're trying to defend a truth in scripture and others aren't believing it, I personally can get very defensive, and I'm passionate and excited about it, but I can't always, it's hard for me to come across in a way that people want to actually listen. like doing it with kindness and grace and gentleness, but you know, I'm learning. But anyway, okay, next, moving on to the historical fiction that I read. I loved this month because I love historical fiction, and just having an entire month set aside to read historical fiction, best thing ever. But I'm not gonna go completely in order of how I read the books, because I read a series in this, like I was able to include this whole series in the Historathon, like using the different prompts. I didn't read them like back to back, but I read them throughout the month. But I'm just gonna include them all here in one place so that it's easier. But this is the Hidden Harvest, excuse me, the Hidden Harvest trilogy by Anne de Graaf, I believe is how you say her name. And these are all set in Poland during World War II and then the decades after World War II, and just doing a deep dive into Poland's history and their struggle with first being occupied by the Nazis and then the Soviets coming in from Russia and holding them under, what's the word, the occupation of the Soviets then, and then bringing in their communistic ideas and everything, and just Poland's struggle politically and like all the way down individually, their rise out of that, and their fight for freedom. How do I explain what these are all about? So yes, historically it's set during that time in Poland and Poland's rise and struggle to freedom from the Soviets, from first the Nazis and then the Soviets. But yes, the first one we mostly follow Jacek, I believe is how you say his name. He's an American spy, but he was born in Poland, and he had immigrated to America when he was really young. But when he was older, he was recruited by the CIA to go over to Poland, since he spoke the language, and yeah, just to be a spy, to know what's going on in Poland, and what's going on with Germany, and then eventually what was going on with the Soviets. And so we follow him throughout this story mostly. But then we also are introduced to Hannah and Tadeusz. So Tadeusz is actually like native-born Polish, but Hannah has German, like her mother is German, and so there's that tension there with the Polish people hating the German people, and while they are Polish citizens, they have German heritage, and so it's just a big tension there. But Hannah and Tadeusz eventually do fall in love and get married, and Hannah's family is Christian, and so Tadeusz, who was raised Catholic, then eventually became a Protestant Christian. But this first book doesn't really go into a whole lot of detail about their stories, like it's mentioned, but there's just a lot more. It's more like a documentary of Poland's history during that time, and so there's not a lot of the story element in it, which made it a little hard to get through, but it was also just very fascinating to me personally because I love history so much. I don't always read historical fiction just to read the fictional parts. I like it because it brings a new light to history and all the facts there. But I still really enjoyed it. Jacek is not a Christian, as I mentioned, the American spy, and so he is involved with some different women, and he's not married, and so there is that element, but it's not detailed, any of the things like his excuse me, it's more like a closed door type of thing, but there is that in this book. I can't remember if it's in the rest of the books as much, but yeah. Anne de Graaf, the author, actually said that the first one was more of a documentary, but then she explored more of Hannah and Tadeusz's story and Jacek's story in these, and I really enjoyed the next two books, book 2 and then book 3, and just watching their story and just getting a glimpse into what life was like in Poland during that time. Like I said, I really loved these stories. like all the Polish words in here that they had included. I was like, I can read those and I know what they are. I'm a nerd when it comes to things like that. I love reading books when I've been to those places, like when Jacek is coming back to Krakow and he's talking about the church towers. He saw that they were still standing. I was like, I saw that church, I know which one he's talking about. And when he was talking about going to Zakopane, which is a little mountain town in the south, on the southern border of Poland, with the Tatra Mountains, I was like, I've been there, I've hiked those mountains. It's like, it's so exciting. Like when I was reading these books, it was so much fun. Hi, Editing Carmen here. Somehow I lost the clip of where I was talking about how those the last two books in the series are mostly set in the city of Gdańsk, which is my favorite Polish city. It's the city by the Baltic Sea, and so just having the majority of the book set in my favorite city in Poland that I visited, I loved it so much. It's exciting. It was just amazing to be able to picture exactly what it was talking about and being like, I've been there, I know what he's talking about. It was incredible. I don't know how I lost that clip, but anyway, moving back on into the video. So I don't know if anyone else would enjoy these as much as I did. Probably. Like I said, these stories are really good. They're heartbreaking. It's hard to read some things in here just because of the difficulties that the Polish people faced during the occupation of the Soviets and all of that. But Poland does triumph in the end. I mean, if you know your history, that's not a spoiler. But anyway, I think I rated this one 4 stars just because, like I said, it was more of a documentary and it didn't have as much of a story in it. And also, another thing, it was a little confusing to stay caught up in everything that I was reading in this one because it jumped from different point of views, from like Hannah and Tadeusz's point of views and then to Jacek's point of view, and then it would also like jump back and forth in time, you know? It was a little confusing, and I think these do it a little bit but not as much, so there's that part. But yes, this one was 4 stars, the rest of these were 5 stars. Overall, the whole series, 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had never read this author before. I don't know if she's written anything else. I should look into that, but overall, I loved it. It was fantastic. Excuse me. Moving on, the next one then that I picked up was A Heart Adrift by Frantz. You've seen this one. I tried to read it in October. That didn't happen. I finally got it read in November, and it conveniently fit a prompt in the Historathon challenge. So I've read so far, this is my 3rd Frantz book that I read. I loved the first 2 that I read. I think they were 5 stars. This one was more of a 3.5, 4 star read. I really enjoyed it. It keeps getting darker. Let me shed some light on the subject. Yes, so we basically follow Esme, who is a chocolatier, and it's a second chance love trope. Basically, she and Captain Henry Lennox were in a relationship, but then he chose the sea over marriage, and so he was gone for 10 years, they didn't see each other, and they still obviously loved each other, but it just wasn't working. It didn't work out at the time, and but he returns, and things pick up again with some difficulty. This is set during the early 1700s, or mid 1700s, I should say, when America was first starting out, and it was just the colonies, and this is during the French and Indian War, and so Henry has come back, and they are getting reacquainted, and then he's called back to captain a warship for England during the French and Indian War, and yeah, it's really good. Like I said, it's 4 stars. Excuse me, but it did leave me a little wanting, I guess I should say. Like, I wanted more from the relationship aspect, like, and this one obviously didn't have as much like historical facts behind it as like the others that I read, And that's okay, not all historical fiction has to have all of the history in it as well, but it took me a while to really get into this book. Like, I was trying to read it in October and I just wasn't getting into the story, and then finally when I read it in November, it was kind of the same thing. The more I got into it, the more I enjoyed it, but I think I just wanted more out of the relationship, because they're separated for 10 years and then they get back together and it doesn't take them long at all. I hope this might be spoilers. Anyway, you know, it was a good story. There's some exciting elements in the story. So far, it's not my top favorite of hers. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the others that I read, but it was still really good. I still enjoyed her writing. There was a point in this book that I got to finally, and I was like, oh yes, there's the Laura Francis writing that I love. Like, the element that she just brings in, and like I feel like she can really stir your emotions. But yeah, I don't really know how to talk about things without spoiling it, like what I didn't enjoy as much about it. But yes, there's that. It was 4-star read. Still good. If you like Laura Frantz, you will probably still enjoy the book. Maybe others liked it better than her other books, but I don't know. Moving on. The next one that I picked up was Daughter of the Reich by Louise Fein, I believe is how you say her last name. So this was my 2-star read. Oh, so this was written from the point of view of a daughter of a high-ranking Nazi officer, and so like most historical fiction that I've read set around World War II is the victims of the Nazis and the ideology that the Nazis brought in, and just like, you know, all of the suffering that caused. Like, you always read it from that perspective of these people either fighting the Germans or being victimized by the Germans, and this one was from the other side. And I was really excited about that. I was like, it's probably going to be a very interesting book, because, you know, like, we always wonder, like, how were so many people blinded and deceived by Hitler and his ideologies, and how could they just follow along blindly and go along with all of these awful things and treat people so horribly. But like, this kind of just gave that other perspective of how easily it was for them to be deceived. And obviously it was years of propaganda and years of like, even before Hitler really became a leader and World War II broke out, it was just indoctrination in the schools and everything like that. But yeah. So that aspect of this book I enjoyed. It was very interesting. What is her name? And she was friends with one of her brother's best friends when they were little. Walter is a Jew, and she falls in love with him, and obviously that's a huge no-no in Nazi Germany at the time. And so there's that storyline going on throughout all of this, and it's just her rise, like, from being a really young girl, being indoctrinated with these beliefs and ideologies, and growing up and starting to question, like, this isn't making sense. Why are we treating these people so horribly? What's wrong with the Jews? And like, what's going on? And so she eventually kind of subtly joins the resistance on the other side. But the reason I only gave it 2 stars is because of the content in here. There's a lot of language in here, and obviously there's a lot of hard things with just the way the Nazis treated people, obviously. But there's also a lot of sexual content in here with her and Walter, and I'm just like, no. We don't need that in books, okay? Just leave it out. A kiss here and there is fine, but we don't need to see anything else. Okay, stop. Leave it out. So many books would be so good, and I would willingly keep them on my shelf if they would just not have that content in there, and I'm just not okay with that kind of content. So this book is going back to the store. I'm not keeping it, and I don't recommend it. But if, from what I've shared, you're interested in it and you pick it up and read it, that's on you. Go in with open eyes, but I do not recommend this book. So there is that. Okay, then the next one that I picked up was The Help by Kathryn Stockett. I read this in the 24-hour readathon or the attempted 24-hour readathon that I did just recently. This book was, I was like, why am I picking the long books for this challenge, you know? This book was well over 400 pages. But my thoughts. Okay, I rated it 3.5 stars, I believe. So it's 4 stars on Goodreads, but I think technically it's 3.5 stars. You know, Goodreads should really make so that we can do those half-star reviews. This is just my opinion. But anyway, I really enjoyed this book. So basically we follow Skeeter. She is a recent college graduate and she wants to be a writer, and she decides that she's going to interview the maids, the black ladies who work for the white ladies in Jackson, Mississippi, back in the early, the 50s? 60s. Yes, in the 60s. And just to get their perspective of what it's like to work for the white ladies and how they're treated and all of that. And obviously the maids are not interested right away because of just all of the racial tension that was going on back in the day and just how they were treated, like the different incidents that were happening. This was like right at the beginning of the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks is mentioned in here, and obviously Martin Luther King was starting his marches in Washington, but yeah, and there's lots of other things that were happening at the time that the ladies right at first were just like, no, we don't want to do this, because they were afraid of what would happen to them if it got out that they were doing these interviews and saying these things about the ladies that they worked for. But she eventually convinces them, and so we have several point of views in the book. We have Skeeter's point of view, and then we have Abilene's point of view, and then we also have Minnie's point of view. Those are the 3 main point of views. So yeah, I really enjoyed it in the sense that it really opened my eyes to what it would have been like back in the day, and it's heartbreaking too to see how these women were treated. But yeah, just the emotional, I think Kathryn Stockett, the author, did a really good job of bringing their emotions to life, and you could actually feel what they were feeling and all of the pain and the heartache that they faced in their lives, and then how they were mistreated all the time and just treated as lower class, and yeah, just all of that. It was very interesting, and I loved that perspective. And I watched the movie immediately after I finished the book, and the movie, I will say, is definitely cleaner. I'll go into some of the content considerations of the book, but the movie is definitely cleaner. But I felt like since I had just read the book and was feeling all the emotions that the ladies were feeling, I watched the movie and thought that it was a little lacking with the emotional side of things, and just their thought, you get a lot of their inside their heads in this book. And seeing their thoughts and what was driving them and all of that. And in the movie you kind of get that, but obviously you can't read minds and thoughts in movies, and so there's only so much that can be said. So I felt it was a little lacking in that aspect, but it is clean. If you want the story without reading the book, you can watch the movie. I think it does a pretty good job of following the storyline. Obviously there are things that have to be left out for it to be a movie, and fit it in the 2-hour time frame that movies usually are. But yeah, so the content considerations of this book, there is some language, and obviously just the violence that these people face sometimes, and then just the mistreatment, and there is one section where there is a lot of heavy, hard, miscarriage. That's part of the storyline for one of the ladies, and it was kind of a lot. So there's that aspect of it as well. But then and then also there is a scene in here, I hope I don't think this is spoilers because it doesn't really add to the story as much, but this is just in the story. But there is a naked man coming to the house of one of the ladies, and the maid is there. I think it's Minnie. Yes, it's Minnie. And she is there at the house, and this naked man comes up and he's obviously trying to assault them, and he is doing very suggestive things, and it's too much. It was a lot, and I was like, this is too graphic. I didn't want to read this. I guess it added to the story a little bit, but it was a little detailed and a little gruesome, and just, yeah, he was obviously trying to assault them as well. But so there's that. I would say 18 plus, 20 plus maybe for the book, age wise. Definitely young girls should not be reading this, I will say that. Anyway, there's that. Overall, I did enjoy it, but there were elements in there that I was just like, it was a 3.5, 4-star read. I did enjoy the book. It was an interesting read for sure, but there are those elements that I can't recommend it to everybody who watches my channel, because I know that there are young girls who follow my channel. So yes, I would say there's plenty of mature content in here that you should definitely be older, like in your late teens, like late teens, you know, basically 20s to read this book, I would think, just because of that content that's in here. But anyway, the next one then that I picked up was All the Stars in the Heavens by Adriana Trigiani. This was my DNF. I got maybe a couple chapters in, and I decided, no, this is not for me. We basically follow Clark Gable and Loretta Young during the early 1930s and the height of Hollywood and movie making, and I thought it would just be interesting just to go dive into that world, even though I don't love Hollywood. I'm not starstruck and obsessed with Hollywood and their movies, but I do like the older movies, you know, like Singing in the Rain, like that era. Wow, I love Singing in the Rain. Random tidbit in there, that's one of my favorite musicals, but I just thought it would be interesting maybe to dive into that world and see what it was like. But it is mostly about Clark Gable and Loretta Young's affair. Clark Gable is married and they meet on the set of Call of the Wild, and then a romance ensues, and I'm just like, no, we don't condone adultery, we don't condone cheating. I don't need to read about your love life, especially if you're cheating on someone. So no. She was, and like in the beginning, like I hadn't even gotten to that part of the story yet, but in the beginning, like in the first 2 chapters, she is 16 or 17. She's really young, Loretta Young is, and she is already starting more of an emotional affair relationship with a married man who is on set with her currently in the movie that she's working on, and I was like, no, we're done. We don't want this. I'm not gonna read this. So this was my DNF. And that is also not remaining on my shelf. Going back to the thrift store. Okay, so then the last one that I picked up was The Tatooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. So like I said before, when I was picking out these books, I was a little unsure and hesitant to pick up this book because the Auschwitz Museum and the people there running it, who are trying to keep the memory alive and honor all the victims lives that were lost there, don't love this book, and they don't really recommend it because the author took a lot of creative liberties with it, and so there's a lot of embellishment. But it is based on real people, and so I was a little torn because the tattooist was a real person. The woman he fell in love with was also a prisoner there at Auschwitz, and they fell in love and they did survive. And so I feel like their story needs to be honored and it should be heard, but there was just a lot of embellishment, and so I wasn't really sure how much of it was accurate, what was real. Yeah. Okay, so I originally rated it 4 stars on Goodreads, but I think it was a 3.5-star read, but I'm actually going to put it down to 3 stars. Yeah, like I said, I think that his story needs to be told. He faced a lot, and he yeah, obviously every victim of the Holocaust faced a lot, but he was a survivor, and so I always love hearing the stories of the survivors of Auschwitz. And when I was in Poland this last time in the summer, we did visit Auschwitz, and so being able to picture in my head when he was talking about it. So what I would have learned growing up in school, I would have just pictured like one location for Auschwitz, like one, yeah, just one location for the entire camp. But there's actually, I didn't know this until I was actually visiting there, and maybe this is more of common knowledge than what I would have known, but there are actually 2 separate locations, all under Auschwitz, but the first one was mostly known as Auschwitz, and then the second location was called Birkenau. I think I'm pronouncing that properly. I don't know for sure. Polish words and all of that are very difficult for my tongue for some reason. But Birkenau is the second location, and that's mostly what I would have pictured growing up, where all of the barracks were and where the gas chambers were, where the crematoriums were, all of that. Like, that was in the second location. And then Auschwitz I was where there were brick barracks and was more of a prison type thing. And so it talks about that in this book, how he would go back and forth to do his work. He was housed in Auschwitz I, but would go to Birkenau to do the work of tattooing people, the numbers on the people. But anyway, this book is very graphic. I don't know that I will, like, really recommend it. There's sexual content in here as well. And obviously just the brutality of the Nazi officers and the way they treated people, and it is very graphic with how the victims were treated, and like the crematoriums, all of that stuff. It's bad. Yeah. And having walked there, walked the road, walked beside the train track that would have hauled the people in the train cars, seeing where they would have disembarked and seeing where the Nazi officers would have sent them straight to the crematoriums or to the work camps. Like, being able to picture in my head just made this book a lot more real and hard to read. Just makes you sick to your stomach. Yeah. After leaving Auschwitz, I literally had to block everything out of my head to be able to enjoy the rest of the day, because it was so hard, and all I wanted to do was just go and sob because it was so gut-wrenching. And I'm still not able to really look at the pictures that I took. I just like scroll past them very quickly on my phone because I still can't look at them. It's just awful. I'm very glad I went, but I definitely will not be visiting again. It's definitely a one-time visit type of place, because it's just that hard. But I think it's important to go and see those places if you can handle it, just to honor the victims and remember the history, so that it hopefully is never repeated again. But anyway, all that to say, this book was interesting. I was glad to know a little bit more about the Tatooist and the woman that he fell in love with, and just their fight for survival and to keep going, and then eventually making it out of the camp and surviving. They moved to Australia eventually, I believe. So yeah. Only 3 stars, because I don't know how much of this was legit, how much of it was more just creative liberty and embellishment by the author. But yeah, all of the content that's in here, I don't know that I would really recommend it unless you're mature and can handle reading these gruesome details and things like that. But yes, there it is. That is my November wrap-up, and I really enjoyed it. It was a really good reading month for sure. Just the fact that I got 9 books read is amazing. I really didn't think I could handle it, because when I picked out all the books, I was like, 10 books? Am I actually going to be able to read 10 books this month? And I did. Well, it was 9 books and then DNF'd the 1, but you know, here we are. All good. If you've read any of these books, let me know what your thoughts were on them. I would love to hear them. And also, did any of these pique your interest, and are you going to be picking them up in the near future? So I think that would be great if I could recommend good books for people. I like to hear when people are picking up books that I recommended. It just makes my heart feel good, you know? But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video, hopefully later this week, because I want to talk about my current reads and what I'm hoping to read for the rest of December. It's not going to be a December TBR because we're already in. I've already been reading some good books, and yeah, it's going to be, I feel like this month is just going to be more of a mood reading month because that's just how it started. I didn't have a TBR planned, and with my surgery and laying around doing nothing, even reading, like it was really hard for me to read actually because my brain was just not in the right space to be able to pick up a book and read. So I didn't get as much reading done as I hoped to during my week of recovery, but you know, we're definitely mood reading this month. So in the next video, I hope to do the, give you a little bit of a reading update and what I will possibly pick up the rest of this month. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!